You have eaten a hot dog. You did not think about it. That is the point. You grabbed it at the ballpark, or off a cart, or out of a package in your own kitchen, and you ate it without asking a single question. And that is exactly what the people who made it were counting on. Because if you knew what was actually inside that tube of processed meat, not the vague idea of it, but the real sequence of biological, chemical, and industrial decisions that produced it, you would never eat one the same way again. Hot dog, first sentence, we're already here. The insane part is not what they put in. The insane part is the process they use to turn animal material that no one would voluntarily eat into something that looks, tastes, and behaves like food. They did not accidentally stumble onto this. The technology is deliberate, documented, and currently running in facilities producing roughly 9 billion hot dogs per year in the United States alone. 9 billion? One country, one product. And almost no one who consumes them knows what the process actually involves. If you enjoy understanding how the world actually works beneath the surface, subscribe. It is the best way to support this work. Drop in the comments what country you are watching from. Now back to it. Here is the first thing they do not put on the label. The primary ingredient in most commercial hot dogs is not beef or pork or chicken in the way those words normally work. When you buy a steak, you are buying muscle tissue that has been cut from a specific part of the animal. When you buy a hot dog, what you are mostly buying is mechanically separated meat. And those two words describe a process that is nothing like cutting. The meat industry uses the term. The FDA has regulated it since the 1980s. And what it actually describes is this. An animal carcass, after the prime cuts have been removed, is pressed at high pressure through a metal sieve with holes small enough to force the remaining soft tissue, fat, connective tissue, nerves, blood vessels, and trace organ material, through as a paste. The result is a uniform pink slurry that has the texture of soft serve ice cream and the color of a wound. That paste is the base. Why is this insane? Because the label on the package will say chicken or pork. It will not say paste extruded from the mechanical separation of everything that remained after the good cuts were taken. Both statements are technically accurate. Only one of them tells you what you are actually buying. Think of it like this. Imagine you squeezed an orange through a very fine mesh. You would get orange juice. It is still orange. It still tastes like orange. But it is not the same thing as eating an orange segment. The structural integrity, the cellular architecture, the fiber, gone. What you get from mechanical separation is the compositional profile of meat without the physical reality of meat. Same source, different object. The industry term for this, in federal regulatory language in the United States, is mechanically separated poultry or mechanically separated pork. The USDA, the United States Department of Agriculture, requires it to be labeled as such when it is present. This is why, if you read the ingredients on a standard Oscar Mayer hot dog, you will see mechanically separated chicken listed in plain text, not hidden. Right there. Most people walk past it without knowing what it describes. Now here is where the chemistry gets stranger. That paste is not food yet. Left alone, it would oxidize, brown, and smell within hours. What transforms it into the pink, shelf-stable, uniformly colored product sitting in your refrigerator involves a set of additives that each solve a specific industrial problem. And together, they produce something that has almost no analog in nature. The first problem is color. Freshly processed meat turns brown when it oxidizes. Brown does not sell. So manufacturers add sodium nitrite, a salt compound that reacts with the myoglobin proteins in the meat paste and produces a molecule called nitrosamyoglobin. That molecule is stable. It stays pink even when cooked, even when refrigerated for weeks. The pinkness of a hot dog is not the color of fresh meat. It is a chemically stabilized reaction product designed to signal freshness to a brain that evolved to associate pink meat with safe food. The USDA allows sodium nitrite in cured meats at concentrations up to 200 parts per million for exactly this purpose. The second problem is texture. Paste has no texture. It is uniform, wet, and structurally incoherent. To create the snap of a hot dog, that specific resistance when you bite through the casing, manufacturers add a binder. Usually, it is a combination of starch, often corn starch or potato starch, combined with sodium phosphates. The phosphates are the functional ingredient here. Phosphates bind water molecules inside the meat matrix, which increases viscosity, and they interact with the muscle proteins remaining in the paste in a way that causes them to cross-link under heat. When you cook a hot dog, you are triggering a structural transformation. The phosphates are directing a protein network to set. The snap is engineered. Subhook. There's an ingredient in almost every commercial hot dog that the World Health Organization classified as a probable carcinogen in 2015. Not the meat, not the fat. The processing byproduct that forms when sodium nitrite reacts with the amino acids in meat during high temperature cooking. This is not a fringe finding. The WHO announcement made international news. and it changed almost nothing about how hot dogs are manufactured. The compound is called nitrosamines. Here's what happens. Sodium nitrite, which is added to preserve color and prevent bacterial growth, including protection against Clostridium botulinum, the bacterium that produces botulism toxin, reacts under heat with amino acids called amines that occur naturally in meat protein. The reaction produces a class of chemicals called N-nitrosamines. Some nitrosamines are potent carcinogens in animal models. The WHO's International Agency for Research on Cancer, reviewing the evidence in 2015, classified processed meat, including hot dogs, as Group 1 carcinogens for colorectal cancer. Group 1 means the evidence of cancer causation in humans is sufficient, not probable. Sufficient. The same classification applies to tobacco smoking and asbestos exposure. The mechanism is different, the dose response is different, but the classification is the same category. The verdict: eating processed meat increases the statistical risk of colorectal cancer. The insanity: this is stamped into the official scientific record at the highest level of evidence the WHO uses, and you can still buy a hot dog at every sports stadium on Earth. The analogy? It is as if the classification existed in a filing cabinet that no one in the supply chain was required to open. The manufacturers know, the regulators know, the information is public, the product is legal. To be precise about scale, the WHO analysis found that consuming 50 grams of processed meat per day, roughly one hot dog, was associated with an approximately 18% increase in colorectal cancer risk. Not an 18% chance of getting cancer, an 18% increase in the relative risk over baseline. The distinction matters. The risk is real. It is not the same as saying one hot dog gives you cancer. It is saying that the cumulative effect of regular consumption shifts your probability in a documented direction. Subhook: the casing around a hot dog is doing something that the meat inside cannot do on its own. Without the casing, you do not have a hot dog. You have a loose sausage that falls apart on the grill and has no snap and no structural integrity. The casing is the reason the product exists in its current form, and most people have no idea what it is made from. There are two types of casings used in commercial hot dog production. Natural casings are made from the intestinal lining of sheep or hogs, specifically the submucosa layer of the intestine, which is collagen-dense and flexible. These are the casings used in premium or artisan products. They produce the snap that hot dog enthusiasts describe. When you cook a hot dog with a natural casing at high temperature and hear that pop, you are hearing the collagen casing rupturing under steam pressure from the expanding interior. That sound is structural failure, deliberate structural failure engineered into the product. The second type is a collagen casing, manufactured from processed animal hides, tendons, and connective tissue, extruded as a synthetic tube. Most mass-market hot dogs use collagen casings because they are uniform in diameter, cheaper to produce, and behave consistently on industrial cooking equipment. Some hot dogs, called skinless, go through the casing manufacturing process and then have the casing stripped before packaging. A skinless hot dog still went through a casing. The casing is the mold. They just removed it afterward. Now zoom out, because what the hot dog actually represents, at scale, is a supply chain solution to a structural problem in meat production. Every animal that is slaughtered produces more low-value trim material than high-value cuts. The ratio is not close. Roughly speaking, the premium muscle cuts from a hog, the loin, the chops, the belly, represent a minority of the animal's total edible material by weight. The rest of it, jowl meat, heart meat, stomach, snout, organ trim, and the mechanical separation yield from bones and carcasses. That material has to go somewhere. Hot dogs and other processed sausages are, among other things, a monetization mechanism for the parts of the animal that the retail market will not buy in their original form. This is not a scandal. It is economics and logistics. The FDA requires full ingredient disclosure. The information is on the label, but the packaging communicates beef frank, or all-natural chicken hot dog, in 2-inch letters on the front, and mechanically separated chicken, pork, water, corn syrup, sodium phosphates, sodium nitrite, in 6-point font on the back. The design is not neutral. It is communicating a story to your emotional brain, while the facts live in the fine print for your logical brain to find if it looks. Subhook. The smoke flavor on a smoked hot dog is almost certainly not from smoking. It is from a liquid derived from burning wood, filtered to remove the particles, and then either injected into the meat paste or atomized around the product in the smoker. Real smoking is a time and labor-intensive process that large-scale production cannot economically support. Liquid smoke gives the same flavor profile in seconds. The flavoring in processed meat is a category of its own. Manufacturers use a combination of spices, primarily salt, white pepper, garlic, coriander, and paprika in traditional formulations, along with what the label will often call natural flavors. Natural flavors, under FDA definitions, can include any flavor compound derived from a plant, animal, or yeast source. The derivation can involve industrial extraction, enzymatic processing, or chemical reactions. The word natural on a food label does not mean minimal processing. It means the original source was biological, not synthetic. The corn syrup listed in most standard hot dog ingredients serves two functions. It contributes sweetness that rounds out the salt-forward flavor profile, but its primary industrial function is moisture retention. Corn syrup is hygroscopic. It holds water molecules in the meat matrix and prevents the product from drying out during the shelf life window. The sweetness is secondary. The water retention is why it is there. Now, here is where the system calculus gets specific. The average American eats roughly 50 hot dogs per year, according to the National Hot Dog and Sausage Council. The United States collectively consumes roughly 20 billion hot dogs per year when stadium, retail, and food service channels are combined. Globally, the processed meat category, of which hot dogs are a subset, generates over $300 billion in annual revenue. This is not a small industry finding a use for scraps. This is a primary product category for companies including Tyson Foods, JBS, Smithfield Foods, which is owned by Hong Kong-based WH Group, and Kraft Heinz. The financial architecture of the product exists because the margins on converting low-cost trim material into a shelf-stable consumer product are substantially better than the margins on selling that trim material as raw input. The hot dog is not a byproduct of the meat industry. At this point, the hot dog is the meat industry. Subhook. There is one ingredient in the standard hot dog formulation that is doing more heavy lifting than any other single component. It is not the meat. It is not the nitrite. It is something that your body recognizes as a reward signal before your brain has processed a single bite, and the manufacturers know exactly how much of it to add. Salt, sodium chloride. The average commercial hot dog contains roughly 500 to 600 milligrams of sodium. One hot dog delivers roughly a quarter of the daily sodium intake the World Health Organization recommends for an adult, 2,000 milligrams per day. That number is not accidental. It sits at the precise threshold where salt enhances flavor perception without triggering the aversion response that comes with oversalting. Salt at this concentration amplifies the perception of every other flavor in the product, suppresses bitterness from the nitrite and phosphate compounds, and triggers a neurological response in the hypothalamus that activates appetite and signals anticipation of caloric reward. Howard Moskowitz, the psychophysicist whose bliss point methodology was adopted across the processed food industry beginning in the 1970s, described this optimization principle across multiple product categories. Salt is the most powerful flavor amplifier in the processed food toolkit. Hot dogs are saturated with it by design, at a level that maximizes palatability and caloric drive without crossing into aversion. The amount is calibrated. The calibration is documented. The result is in every package. The cheat code here is not to stop eating hot dogs. It is to understand what you are actually buying when you reach for one. The label tells you. The words are there. Mechanically separated chicken means paste. Sodium nitrite means engineered color and a documented carcinogenic reaction under heat. Natural flavors means industrial flavor chemistry with a biological source. Corn syrup means water retention and appetite stimulation. None of this is hidden. It is printed on every package. The bet the industry makes is that you will read the product name on the front and not the ingredient list on the back. That bet has been correct for roughly a century. Here is the thing that reframes all of it. The hot dog was not invented as processed food. It was invented as a preservation solution. Sausage, the category that includes hot dogs, was developed in cultures across Europe and Asia as a way to extend the shelf life of perishable animal material before refrigeration existed. Salt, smoke, and casing were not additives. They were survival technology. The chemistry that the WHO now flags as a carcinogen risk was, for most of human history, the alternative to botulism. The sodium nitrite in your hot dog is doing the same job that centuries of salt-cured sausage making developed empirically before anyone knew what a bacterium was. The product survived the refrigerator. It survived food safety regulation. It survived the WHO classification. It generates 20 billion units of annual consumption in one country alone. Not because people do not know what is in it, because the bliss point holds, because the snap of the casing holds, because the combination of salt and fat and engineered color and the specific texture of mechanically processed protein hits a set of sensory targets that were refined across decades of food science and hundreds of millions of dollars in product development. Oscar Mayer has been refining that formula since 1883. Smithfield Foods, now under WH Group ownership, processes roughly 30 million hogs per year across its North American operations. Tyson Foods runs processing facilities that convert live animals into packaged consumer products at a scale that is genuinely difficult to hold in your head as a real number. These are not small companies optimizing a niche product. They are some of the largest food manufacturers on Earth, and the hot dog sits inside their portfolio as a high-margin conversion product, the mechanism by which low-value animal material becomes a premium-priced consumer brand. The engineering investment behind that conversion is substantial. The flavor science, the phosphate chemistry, the casing manufacturing, the liquid smoke application, the sodium calibration, none of it happened by accident. Each element was optimized through product testing, consumer research, and iterative reformulation over decades. The bliss point on a hot dog is not a coincidence. It is a target that was hit deliberately and is maintained deliberately in every batch. The first documented sausage recipe is in the oldest surviving cookbook, the Piscius, written in ancient Rome roughly 2,000 years ago. The ingredients were pork, pine nuts, spices, and fish sauce. Straightforward, recognizable. You could read that recipe and cook it today. The basic form, ground meat, casing, heat, has survived 2,000 years of civilization, 3 industrial revolutions, and the complete transformation of the global food supply. What changed is everything inside the formula. The pine nuts are gone. The fish sauce is gone. The animal is different. The process is unrecognizable to anyone who wrote the original recipe. The casing is a manufactured collagen tube extruded from processed hide. The shape is essentially the same. Virtually everything else is engineered.